All right, let's talk about a name that pretty much every doctor knows, but a story that, well, very few people actually understand. We're going to dive into Hippocrates and really try to separate the man from the myth.
You know the one. First, do no harm. It's the phrase, right? The one we all think of when we think about doctors. It feels like the absolute bedrock of medical ethics, and we're told it comes straight from the ancient Greek physician himself, Hippocrates. It's so simple, so powerful.
So here's the thing. Did Hippocrates ever actually say that? The short answer? Nope. That exact phrase, first do no harm, it's just not in the original Hippocratic Oath. And that little bombshell is what kicks off this whole journey, really. A deep dive into what we think we know versus what the history books actually say.
Okay, so let's start with the man himself. I mean, he's called the father of medicine. That's a pretty huge title, right? But to really get a grip on his legacy, we've got to peel back all those layers of myth and try to find the actual person underneath.
Now, the historical record is a little spotty, you know? But we can place Hippocrates right smack in the middle of Greece's golden age. We're talking the same time as Socrates, Plato, the Parthenon, all that good stuff. We know he was born on the island of Kos, he started a medical school there, and he traveled all over the place, making a pretty massive impact during his life.
But this leads us right back to the central mystery, doesn't it? The famous oath that carries his name. Well, most scholars today agree it was probably written after he died, by his followers. So, if he didn't write the oath that made him famous, what was his real contribution? Why do we still think of him as this giant of medicine?
Well, that brings us to what he actually did. And honestly, it was way more revolutionary than just some oath. This guy fundamentally changed how people thought about sickness and the human body. See, before Hippocrates, getting sick meant you'd angered the gods. That was it. The only cure was to go to a temple and pray for forgiveness. But he came along and said, hold on a second. He proposed this radical idea that diseases weren't supernatural at all. They had natural causes, things related to your environment, your diet, your lifestyle. This was a gigantic leap from magic to actual science.
This is his real legacy. He basically invented a system. Instead of just guessing or praying, he taught doctors to be more like detectives, Carefully watch the patient, write down all the symptoms, pay attention to things like diet and climate. He was all about understanding the body as a whole system and believing that it had its own power to heal. And that right there, that's the foundation of modern medicine.
Okay, so let's circle back to that famous oath. Because when you actually read the original text from the 4th century BC, oh boy, it has some stuff in it that you would just not expect to find in a modern doctor's pledge. Not even close.
First off, it kicks off by swearing an oath to a whole bunch of Greek gods, Apollo, Asclepius, you name it. And then it gets into these really specific, almost like union rules. You had to promise to treat your teacher's family like your own brothers, share your money with your teacher if he needed it, and even teach his son's medicine for free. It was as much a business contract as it was an ethical code.
And then you get to the stuff that really sparks debate today. The original oath flat out forbids things that are central to modern medicine. It says you can't give a lethal drug to anyone, even if they ask. It says you can't cause an abortion, and, get this, it says you can't perform surgery at all. Now, that ban on surgery is a real puzzle for historians. I mean, why would it say that? Especially since other books from the same Hippocratic collection are filled with detailed instructions on how to do surgery. It's a total contradiction. And it's led a lot of experts to think that maybe the oath wasn't for all doctors, but was written by a specific philosophical group, maybe like the Pythagoreans, who just had different beliefs.
So when you add it all up, the swearing to pagan gods, the weird financial clauses, the bans on things like surgery, it's pretty clear why the original oath just doesn't work for modern medicine. It's totally incompatible. And that's led to a really fascinating evolution of the oath over the centuries.
And you can really see that change here. The pledge to Greek gods, that's been swapped out for a promise to serve humanity. Those explicit bans on abortion and surgery, gone. And maybe the biggest shift of all is moving away from that old doctor knows best model to a modern focus on respecting what the patient wants, their autonomy and their dignity. There's a really popular modern version, written back in 1964, that just captures this new spirit perfectly. It includes lines about remembering that there's an art to medicine as well as science, and that warmth, sympathy, and understanding can be just as powerful as any drug or surgical knife. It really puts the focus back on the human side of things.
And this isn't just theory, it's what's actually happening. If you look at US medical schools today, pretty much all of them have their students take an oath. But how many of them use the original classical version? Zero, not a single one. Most of them use a heavily modified oath or a totally different one they've written themselves.
So, this brings us to the big final question, right? If Hippocrates probably didn't even write the oath, and the original oath is so outdated nobody uses it, why do we even still talk about him? Why does his name still mean so much?
And the answer is actually pretty simple, but it's also really powerful. His legacy isn't some dusty old document. It's the tradition he started. It's this ongoing conversation that's been happening for like 2,400 years about what it really means to be a good doctor. That's what's lasted. The core idea of ethical, patient-first care.
When you boil it all down, it comes to these core principles that really capture the spirit of his work. 1. Benefit the patient. Always act in their best interest. 2. Avoid harm. Don't intentionally do wrong. And 3. Respect privacy. Keep their information confidential. Those ideas, they're timeless, even if the specific rules around them change. Think about that. For more than 2,400 years, that tradition has been guiding doctors. It keeps evolving, adapting to new science and new social values. It's not a museum piece. It's a living, breathing legacy.
So I guess the real takeaway is this. The oath itself, it's a historical artifact. It's a snapshot of one moment in time. But the conversation it started, that fundamental question about a doctor's duty to their patient and to all of us, well, as we face crazy new challenges with AI, genetics, and global health, that question is more important now than it has ever been.